Hey everyone.
Welcome to Big Flick Energy, the most anticipated film since Avengers Endgame came out in the form of Spider-Man No Way Home. This movie was incredible and may go down as my favorite Spider-Man movie ever. I still have to watch the other ones again to make sure, but honestly, it's making a really strong case. Before I continue though, I just want to say this video does contain spoilers for what happens in No Way Home, so be careful and watch the film first and then come back to watch this video. But I truly did love No Way Home. Outside of incredible Spider-Man team-ups and fan service, it was just a really good film that fixed a lot of the issues I had with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, finally setting him up to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that doesn't rely on tech, knows that great power comes with great responsibility, and he knows that the risks of telling everybody his identity are grand. By everybody forgetting who Peter Parker is, it sets up a more down-to-earth Spidey that we know we are getting a new trilogy of already, actually. So today, I'll be discussing my proposal to Marvel for the next Spider-Man trilogy. So let's hope Kevin Feige watches this video. So, for this next trilogy, I wanted to keep it close to home for Spidey, where every film takes place in New York, and I thought it would be really interesting to make this trilogy follow the same pattern as the first, with using home in every title, but instead using New York in every title. For this first film, we have Spider-Man Lost in New York. This is the same title given to Home Alone 2, which is meant to show this film will be the change from the home trilogies to the New York trilogy, along with establishing the Spider-Man as a character on his own that is living for himself for the first time ever, and he's pretty lost on everything going around him. He's working at Feast in honor of Aunt May, and he's lost without her in this film, still recovering from her death and how to carry on her legacy. Heading the film as the villains of the first act and the second act will be Vulture, Scorpion, and Shocker. We were teased of Scorpion in Spider-Man Homecoming through a prison sequence between Scorpion and Vulture as Mark Gargan and Adrian Toomes, but hadn't gotten anything since. What we saw was Gargan asking Vulture who Spider-Man was so he could kill him, but Vulture lied in saying he didn't know, showing that Vulture was kind of redeemed in part because he knew Peter was a good kid. But now that he forgot who Peter is at all, and he just knows Spider-Man as the guy that put him in prison, there's no incentive for him to stay good. This will lead to Spider-Man having to take on Vulture, Scorpion, and Shocker after they break out of prison, with Vulture making Scorpion a new suit. Spider-Man can't take on all three of these villains on his own, and feels lost in the city. But the Venom symbiote fuses with Peter after finding him due to the ending of Spider-Man No Way Home, where we see part of the Venom symbiote stay in our universe. So by it fusing with him, it makes him a much stronger adversary for Scorpion, Vulture, and Shocker. He defeats the three, but Mac Gargan escapes, without the Scorpion armor though. We see Peter start to become a darker version of himself and feel powerful until he eventually comes face to face with Kraven the Hunter. We do see a short fight between Kraven and Spidey, but ultimately we see Kraven use a trap which forces the symbiote to get off of Peter and for Kraven to capture it. Now that Kraven has the symbiote, he leaves the battle with Spider-Man, where we see Kraven give the symbiote to a mob boss that could be Kingpin or Tombstone. So basically this mob boss hired Kraven to do this task, for those of you that didn't really understand why he was in the picture. So this mob boss then brings in Gargan and asks him if he wants a second chance working for him. Gargan and the symbiote fuse to make Venom, and Gargan says he has to finish another job. First, killing Spider-Man. Before Spider-Man entering the battle, we see Kraven leave a note in the symbiote cage for we see Venom target Spider-Man and get the long-awaited Spider-Man vs. Venom fight. Spider-Man is losing since after losing the symbiote, he feels like he needs his friends and needs his tech, and he feels lost. But remembers, after pondering this question for a while of what the symbiote reminds him of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man telling him he fought a Black Goo once. This reminds Spidey that he is Spider-Man, and that he can win this fight no matter how badly unmatched he is, and that he'll never stop fighting. Spider-Man ultimately wins because of this. Gargan and Venom separate. Spider-Man takes Venom back to his apartment, keeping him in the symbiote cage given to him by Kraven, and Spider-Man asks Gargan how he got the symbiote, which he replies to with having gotten it from Kingpin or Tombstone. We haven't decided which one yet since I don't know what Marvel has planned for Kingpin, with the finale of Hawkeye, which I recommend you all watch. So this then leads into the next film, Spider-Man New York's Finest. I gave it this name since it shows Spidey taking on the mob and working with the cops of New York to find out who's behind everything. For those of you who have played the Spider-Man PlayStation game, we meet a character named Yuri Watanabe that works for the NYPD, and she's the main cop Spider-Man works for in this film. Kingpin or Tombstone realizes what's happening and hires Kraven again to find and kill Spider-Man, since Spider-Man and the NYPD are shutting down a ton of his operations through New York. He finds the first traces of how to track the mob when this kid doing service hours at Feast tells Peter he overheard a Feast worker on the phone, which sounded like there was a dirty business going on, and the kid felt like he could trust Peter, so he told him. Peter asked the kid for his name, and the kid said his name is Miles, obviously hinting towards Miles Morales' future in the MCU. Kraven is actually beating Spider-Man, given all of his traps where he's severely outsmarting Peter, until Daredevil jumps in out of nowhere and saves Spider-Man from being killed. We see Daredevil fight Kraven and he is kind of losing, but Spidey gets back up and the duo overpower Kraven. So, Kraven escapes. Daredevil and Spider-Man get to interact and must work together to take on Kingpin or Tombstone with the help of Echo, who Daredevil calls in to help, and Black Cat, who we get introduced to in this film, and has her own problems with the mob. The film eventually leads into these four breaking into the headquarters of Kingpin or Tombstone and taking him on. But he has help in Kraven and another hired mercenary, Taskmaster, to help set this character up for more comic-accurate future appearances. We see Echo take on Taskmaster as two characters known to mimic opponents. We see Daredevil take on Tombstone and Kingpin, where with Kingpin it's a rematch for TV shows, or with Tombstone it's just a fun fight, which can be similar to the TV shows. We see Black Cat take on a ton of the gang members, and she tries to target the main person that's working in the mob that she has problems with. And then finally, we once again see Spider-Man struggle with Kraven until he remembers the conversation he had with Daredevil earlier, where Daredevil mentions how he fights crime despite being blind by using his surroundings to his advantage. Spider-Man starts using the building itself as an advantage, hence his surroundings, setting up traps for Kraven and even taking down Taskmaster, who is beating Echo, and Kingpin or Tombstone, who is beating Daredevil, along with the rest of the mob that Black Cat is trying to handle. By the time Spider-Man webs up Kingpin or Tombstone, both Taskmaster and Kraven has escaped the building. The ending of the film sets up the Sinister Six coming together to take on Spider-Man, edited by college graduate genius Ned Leeds, who remembers Spider-Man as a person who killed his best friend, but he doesn't know his name as he tells Kraven, setting Ned up as Hobgoblin for the third part. The third part will be known as Spider-Man King of New York. Everybody loves Spider-Man in this film, as he took down one of, if not the largest mob boss in all of New York, and worked hand in hand with the authorities, which even gains the respect of J. Jonah Jameson. New York loves Spider-Man, and they actually start an annual Spider-Man parade the same way they did in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 3. Even though Spider-Man is the king of New York, Peter definitely is not, and is still very down, even though everything in his life is going right as Spider-Man. Miles is at the Spider-Man parade and bumps into Ned as Ned asks him why he looks up to Spider-Man, to which Ned argues against, just showing how far Ned has gone. Everybody loves Spider-Man, except for a few individuals who want revenge on him. We see a continuation of the end credit scene from Spider-Man New York's Finest, where Ned is talking to Kraven. Kraven tells Ned he wants to take out Spider-Man because that's the one target he's never succeeded in taking out. Ned explains the truth behind why he believes Spider-Man killed his best friend, and explains how he and the friend, which is MJ, remember vividly having somebody else in their lives that a lot of the recent memories were when Spider-Man was around, and once they went further away from Spider-Man's adventures, they noticed that friend was gone from their lives, and they felt Spider-Man must have gotten rid of this person from their lives somehow and made them forget. Ned tells him that before they target Spider-Man, they'll need some help as he puts on his armor. We then see a fully armored Hobgoblin break into prison, breaking out Mac Gargan, Adrian Toomes, and Herman Schultz with upgraded suits for all three of them, as Vulture, Scorpion, and Shocker, where Shocker's is now more similar to what he has in the Spider-Man PlayStation game. After the 5 are ready, Kraven mentions how he has another member for their team, but it needs a host, obviously speaking about Venom. Ned says he has an idea of who, and he kidnaps Flash Thompson because Flash was a major bully for Ned and wants him to suffer, in which a symbiote taking over his body would do. It turns out the cage Kraven had to Spider-Man was still connected to Kraven in some way. So the cage flew back to Kraven, flying through Spider-Man's apartment building. Gargan is afraid of the symbiote since it took control of him just as it took control over Flash. As the Sinister Six were ready to take on Spider-Man, and we're wondering how to find him, Kraven said he was on his way. This was true, as Spider-Man was following the trail of broken walls in buildings from the symbiote cage, which eventually lead to a place familiar to Peter and Ned from their past. During the fight of the Sinister Six versus Spider-Man, Spidey is actually winning since he's become a beast over the last 2 films. Actually over the last 5 films. But begins to realize where he is, which leads to him losing focus and getting knocked down. As Scorpion is about to kill Spider-Man, Venom blocks it. We slowly see Venom change forms into something more similar to what we know in the comics, Flash's Agent Venom, as Flash regains control of the symbiote, leaving Scorpion confused, while Flash as Agent Venom switches sides and starts fighting against Vulture and Scorpion, but not Shocker, as he steals Shocker's gloves as Agent Venom often does with weaponry and uses it as his own. Spider-Man is still on the floor after taking a beating as Kraven comes up to him ready to kill him. As he is about to do it, Ned blocks the attack, saying he's going to be the one to kill him. But Kraven gets pissed because he wants to be the one to be able to complete his hunt. So Hobgoblin and Kraven have a fight, which Hobgoblin eventually wins. As Ned is about to kill Peter, he explains to Peter why he wants to kill him and why he wants to do it here, which leads to Peter realizing Hobgoblin is actually Ned. Peter says his name and Ned stops as Peter begins to tell him the truth, until very shortly after, Ned gets stabbed through the chest by Kraven. Peter is now furious and has to fight against Kraven, where Kraven tells Peter he's the only hunt he never finished, and Peter tells Kraven he's the only criminal he's never put behind bars. So they have a massive fight as Agent Venom is still fighting against Scorpion and Vulture, and eventually Spider-Man defeats Kraven. Spider-Man begins beating up Kraven, ready to kill him until he remembers the words of Aunt May, "With great power comes great responsibility," and the Andrew and Tobey Spider-Man, where Andrew said he stopped pulling his punches, and Tobey stopping him from killing Green Goblin. After this, he stops himself and just webs up Kraven, leaving him unconscious but alive. Spider-Man goes up to Ned and reveals himself as Peter, telling him the truth of how he was the friend and how he needed to make him forget, which is a very heartfelt moment, leading to Ned telling Peter as he's about to die, as Peter tells Ned he should have been there for him. Ned tells Peter that MJ needs him more than he does. So Flash is struggling to defeat Scorpion and Vulture, but Spider-Man makes quick work of them, but continues swinging instead of stopping as he is going to see MJ. As he leaves, a crowd shows up and sees Flash having defeated a ton of villains in Scorpion, Kraven, Shocker, and Vulture. Obviously, we know that Spider-Man did most of the work, but Agent Venom gets the credit. The crowd starts chanting as they ask him his name, and he hears Venom say Venom, but Flash says Agent Venom. We then see MJ and Peter begins talking to her. He tells her the truth and that he's sorry for everything, and that if she's willing to give him a chance, he would love to start the relationship over. So it's a pretty heartfelt moment, but we eventually jump a couple of years in the future, where the next Spider-Man Day is taking place, and we see both Agent Venom floats and Spider-Man floats, and Spider-Man makes a big announcement at the event saying he's retiring as Spider-Man to start a new life, but that there is a new Spider-Man in town, as we see Miles Morales swing in his iconic black and red suit, with Peter announcing him as the new and improved Ultimate Spider-Man. The movie then ends showing Peter giving MJ a kiss, as she has an engagement ring on. So this is the trilogy I would love to see happen after No Way Home. Not only does it keep the grounded feel of Spider-Man established at the end of No Way Home, but it builds off of the lessons he learned from May and the other two Peters, allows Peter to continue growing as Spider-Man and Peter, closes off Tom Holland's Spider-Man story with him returning to MJ, and sets up the next phase of Spider-Man superheroes in Agent Venom and Miles Morales' Spider-Man. Honestly, I had a ton of fun coming up with this trilogy, and would love to do more videos like this down the road. If you guys have any ideas of what you would want to see, please let me know down in the comments. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification to find out whenever a new episode is out. Thanks again, and see you next time on Big Flick Energy.